Alright, time for another draftphysics.com video presentation. It's not me. Okay, not that idiot. So anyway, this is a review of a Mindless Marbles video. Really just despicable lie after despicable lie after despicable lie. So for 2 years, I have been talking about a specific experiment using a device, thousands of years old, a lever. Okay, its primary function is to basically take momentum, that is velocity, okay, over a distance, and do a conversion, okay, where you have a lot of weight applied in a short period of time versus a little weight applied over a longer period of time. And it's a very useful, okay, you can change an easy light movement into a strong high torque movement and vice versa. And it basically is a momentum converter. That is, you're converting an object moving, a one object moving a 2 velocity into, okay, a 2 object moving a 1 velocity. It converts momentum. It conserves momentum. So all the movements really have been about up and down motions, where we have a consistent opposition from gravity, and there's no other real factor interfering in the experiment. Okay, so we're not doing Newton's cradles in a circle or something. We're not doing any of that kind of stuff. It's a really simple statement being made. Now, what I have stated is that in practice, in fact, in the real physical universe, there's kind of a simple proof that momentum is the ruling function of the universe. And the simple proof is that you can use a lever, okay, with a stick, okay, with the same amount of stick on both sides. All right, I can choose to put a weight, a 2 mass here, or I could put a 1 mass twice the distance, okay. And those two things, the contention is their weight, okay, their motion and gravity will be proportional in the sense that it's the same difference. Moving this twice the velocity, twice the distance, is the same as moving this. And that's a total amount of energy. It's not how much does it take to move a whole wheel through a circular motion. It's just about how much does it take to lift it the same amount, okay, relative proportional on the lever. So the simple argument is that if I apply a force here, I couldn't tell whether there was a 2 mass here or a 1 mass here, because obviously it's going to weigh the same. If I put a 2 mass here and we have a 2 mass here and I oscillate it, the 2 masses have to move the same, okay? The energy is going to go from one into the other, and then it's going to go back and recycle, and it's going to oscillate back and forth. And it will do the same thing with the 1 mass out here. This will move identically. If this piece of the lever will move exactly the same whether there's a 1 mass here or a 2 mass here. The lever itself, this piece of lever, will move exactly the same speed and the same time, because they weigh the same. It's the same weight. So if I prevented you from seeing, I could do a little trick where I could put the 2 mass here or I could put the 1 mass here, and I could say, press on the lever and tell me which one is there. So that's the argument I made. And what does this idiot do? He does a completely different experiment where he's got a string coiled up on a cylinder, and he's dropping a weight, and then he has a lever tied to that, and then he puts the different masses on, which means that you're going to rotate them in one direction. Okay, it's not going to oscillate. It's not an impulse experiment. It's adding more and more energy as it falls. It spins, the wheel spins faster and faster. And what are you doing? Oh, we're right back to the whole friction argument. The whole distance this way isn't going up and down. It's going sideways. So sideways, we're right back to the friction argument, where light things have less friction. Light things going fast lose less energy per foot to friction than slow things going, things going, heavy things going slow. So a 2 mass and a 1 mass. So a 2 mass will lose more energy to the ground, okay, because it's touching the ground more. There's more contact with the ground, and it's, because of its slow velocity, there's more contact. So not only is there more contact because it weighs more, its slower movement means there's more contact per foot. And so, I've already done this, pointed this out, that the speeds don't reach, this isn't going half the speed until it's 3/4 of the way down the track. That's when it reaches half the speed. So this equals exactly this. And obviously you have this left over, okay, and that's obviously the same amount of energy lost here that was lost here. So it just proves the fact that the faster you're going, the less friction, the less energy you lose to friction. So he's just sitting there and applying the same principle I've already debunked. He's not doing the actual experiment I pointed out. He's not in any way testing this theory. This theory was tested by Brozo. Brozo tied a spring to a lever, okay? So he took a lever, coiled the spring. I've done this so many times now. All right, and then he put a 1 mass out here and a 2 mass here, did the experiment individually, and he came out with a 2-to-1 relationship, perfectly validating momentum, validating the fact that there isn't any difference. From this spring's perspective, it's the same thing, putting the 2 here or the 1 here. Spring says same thing, same difference. The spring tested it. I could put a scale and push on the lever, right? I could take the scale. All right. I could take a scale right here on the lever. I push the scale down on the lever, right? The scale is going to read exactly the same if I have a 1 mass out here or a 2 mass here. The scale will do exactly the same thing. The little needle on the scale will move exactly the same because it's the same weight. The weight, the mass times the velocity is exactly the same weight. The same foot-pounds of energy make them move. Amazing. So he's made an 8-minute video, quote mining bullshit, implying completely different experiments are the same experiment. Completely different. Yeah, it's just such a lie to say one has anything to do with the other. That in any way he debunked my contention, in any way whatsoever. He didn't touch it. He didn't do an experiment that's anything like the experiment I proposed. And then this gutless coward, this puke, has the tenacity to sit there and quote, Photoshop me essentially with this clueless idiot crap. This gutless coward who won't show his face, won't use his own voice in a video, will sit there and do this shit and say that's fair cop. No, show yourself. Let me do this to you, you fucking coward. God, what a ragged piece of shit. And these are the people Brozo supports. He's got a bold link on his page. Go see this video, this lie. This incredible fucking lie that this has anything to do with the video I did, anything to do with this, the experiment I suggested. Look at the title, Draft Science is Laughably Wrong. No, I'm laughably honest. It's apparently laughable to be an honest person with integrity. Okay? All these dishonest, lying pieces of shit get away with this crap. I mean, amazing. So let's we'll play some of this crap. Oh, it's just like these people are proving my point. Humans are not worth saving. They are lying scum. Okay.
For quite some time, Draft Science has been making the claim that if you have a lever or anything that
So he's reading it to us. Oh, how interesting, with a computer voice.
Can move circularly like a gear, and if there is some mass placed at a distance away from the center pivot, you would not be able to distinguish between a mass m at radius r versus a mass m over 2 at radius.
Right, so we're talking about a scale, and we're not talking about rotating it, okay? We're not talking about rotating a scale, okay? We're talking about a balance, and we're talking about you're pushing on the balance and seeing how heavy the other side is. And the argument remains valid, okay, that if I set up this circumstance with the two mass here and the one mass out here, you're not going to be able to tell the difference, because this part will move exactly the same if the two masses here or the one mass is out here. This part has to move exactly the same.
2R without seeing the mass placement. He and another commenter parapolologic claim that a given amount of force applied will result in the same motion in both cases.
Yes, the same impulse. We're not talking about spinning a wheel. We're talking about how levers work. Levers aren't wheels. Even the gear example, if you were to use a gear, I pointed out clearly in the gear example, you're only doing a quarter turn. You're only converting this direction into that direction, and that's it. You're letting it fly off the gear. So even when I used a circular device, I conditioned the circular device to a certain function. Yeah. There was no friction in the downward direction. It was only pushing sideways, no friction on any bearing. So when you turn a gear, there's no friction for the weight you have when you're going sideways, unlike his experiment.
So the point is that, so if this falls, if I drop this at the higher velocity, there's no chance it will bounce. So I do this with 2x the velocity. All right, so this one comes
So I can't believe he's playing me saying this, showing a specific experiment, and then he does a completely different experiment and says, look, I proved your experiment wrong. I mean, it's so overtly cheating to imply that this thing he's doing has something to do with the impulse foot-pound pressure I was talking about.
2x the velocity, it's half the mass. This sees it as if it was exactly this. So Brozo or you will never answer this question. That if you pushed on a lever and I put a one mass here, and then I switched it, I put a half mass here, and you couldn't see which one was there. There was a wall, you couldn't see what was on the other side of the lever. There's no way from you pushing on it that you could tell the difference between this and this.
And again, that remains still true. It will be true forever because it has to move exactly the same. To create twice the velocity here, it has to move exactly the same. And it does. Because it's the same fucking weight.
They would weigh exactly the same, they would feel exactly the same, they would push just the same. Everything about them would be exactly the same because the lever itself moves exactly the same no matter which object I put on the side. If I put the one mass object here, every atom in the lever moves exactly the same as if I put the half mass out here. Exactly the same motion. A simple gear proves it, okay? So I have a gear fixed to another gear with little notches on it, all right? Little notches. So I put a two mass on it.
I mean, it's just amazing, right? I mean, he's showing me, describing a specific experiment, and he does something completely different and says it's the same experiment. All right, what the fuck?
Gear here, and I put one mass here. 1, 2. Right, if I gave you the gear, and I just put the two mass close to the fulcrum, close to the center there. All right, this is twice the distance, by the way. All right, and I told you to turn it, and I was inside a box, and you couldn't see. You couldn't tell if I put the one mass here or I put the two mass here. The two things would feel exactly the same. It would take just as much energy to move one from here to there as it would take to...
Right, and again, it's just throwing it sideways. So it's not putting weight down on the bearing of the gear, because you're just pushing it sideways. You're not holding it.
Move the other one from here to there, right to the peak point. You couldn't tell the difference. You couldn't for $1 billion. You're gonna have $1 billion prize for you to be able to tell the difference between when I have the two mass here and I have the one mass out here. You couldn't do it. You couldn't win the money, all right? Because you're putting the same exact energy in. Because it's the same argument here. It's the same argument as a scale. It balances. It's the same. You can't tell the difference. It's physically the same, okay? Because this is going to be twice the distance as this is going to be. You're going to move 2 pounds.
It's the same energy. When a skater puts out their arms and rotates slower, and then they bring in their arms and they rotate faster, it's exactly the same energy. The same exact energy is spinning the person, even though they're going faster when the weight's on the outside than they are when the weight's on the inside. It's the same exact energy. The little mass, the heavy mass moving slow here on the center of the gear is the same as the lighter mass moving twice the distance on the outside. It's the same exact energy. MV equals MV.
Half the distance, you're going to move the 1 pound, and it's going to be the same amount of energy. And if I launch these things, if I made them so they can fly off, and so the lever, there's a little stop here, so it stops it. You turn it, okay, with the same...
I just said, put a stop right there. We're not talking about continuous motion, because then you're counting the total weight of the gear. We're just talking about throwing the objects using a gear as a lever.
Force for each one, you apply the same force for each one, and you let them fly off the gear. Okay? Your preposterous, proven, settled science says this has twice the amount of joules of energy. So if I just put the object on the further away lever, I can make twice the energy. I can make free energy. Okay, and get rid of the 2, and the 1 and the 2 will balance perfectly. That is, this side of the lever can't really tell whether I put a 2 here or I put a 1 out here. Yeah, toward.
So, again, yes, why is he even replaying this? I'm perfectly proud of the fact that I have made this point over and over very consistently and accurately. And where is he going to? He's not going to touch it. He's not going to come anywhere close to using an experiment that's anything like what I'm describing. It's nothing like what I've described.
The sense of how much pressure is being applied will be exactly the same. And I can kind of just convert that into a gear and create essentially the same kind of.
I mean, it's just fucking, look, I'm drawing it, pointing out, see, it's really just like the lever. It's the same argument. This side, if you were to push on this side, it's the same experiment. You're just saying how much mass is it. It's going to move it commensurate to how much mass it is. You have a certain amount of energy, and the fact is the mass and velocity equally contribute to what you're going to get on the output. mv equals mv. Big M, little v, same difference as big V, little m.
One distance, one measure of distance from the center.
Newton, Descartes, Galileo, all got the right answer. Fucktard, okay, is defending a fable. A pile of nonsense invented by a guy who believed in solitons and monads.
Or I can put a 1 out here, and those two things, if you were to turn to 12 o'clock, if you were to turn the gear, and I put a 2 on the small gear, or
it's just incredible. I mean, it's incredible that he's wasting all this video time on an assertion I haven't retracted, I wouldn't take back, nothing. And he's not going to come anywhere close to making a single piece of rational argumentation actually proving me wrong, laughably wrong. He's not going to show anything that's laughably wrong here. Every one of these statements still stands after his retarded video.
on the outside gear, you couldn't tell the difference. Even for $1 billion, you couldn't tell the difference. The same amount of energy will be required to swing it to this location. And the key is that the distance is twice the distance for the 1 mass, half that amount of distance for the 2, and that by momentum.
Again, I don't need to do this rotational argument, but the argument is still the same, because all you're going to be doing is throwing them into space. It's really the same thing, because it's not touching a surface. There's no place for the friction to steal any of the energy disproportionately.
Equals the same thing. So all the lever's doing is it's changing, it's converting one momentum into another momentum based on the fact that you change the mass. So whatever mass you change it to, you put it in the correct location, and it'll be exactly the same momentum. You just imbalance it, okay, in terms of one side's higher in gravity, and then you let it go, and it oscillates. Now, their argument is somehow it oscillates at different speeds. So if I put 4 to 4 at the same distance, somehow it's a different speed than if there's 1 out here.
So again, so here I did 4-to-1 ratio on my porch. And the simple argument is if I put 2 here, and I put 3 here, it's always going to be the same. As long as I put the right distance away, it's always going to create, okay, the same weight on either side of the lever, and these 4 will move the same regardless. That's exactly what levers do. They convert a 4 mass going 1 velocity into a 1 mass going a 4 velocity. It's exactly the same energy in the oscillator. The same energy is on this side that is on this side. Fact. Remains a fact.
And 1 out at the other end. And there's no logic for that argument. It doesn't conserve momentum. It's completely against all these physics principles that, Professor Lewin quotes again. You can finagle kinetic energy. You can't, but nature can't finagle momentum.
Now this is important to Gary's lever argument, because he claims that when you replace a 2x mass at 1x distance by a 1x mass at 2x distance, the motion of the lever will be the same.
Okay, let's understand. He's not going to do a lever experiment. He's going to do a wheel experiment. He's not going to do anything like what I'm describing about lifting objects straight up and down in gravity, ideally. He's not going to touch that experiment.
And so when the same force is applied on one end either by pressing it or by dropping another mass, you can get the 1x mass at 2.
Dropping the mass onto the lever, which is the same as like crashing a train into it, right? So I've made the argument that you can use a 10-ton train going 5 miles an hour, and you can create a 5-ton train going 10 miles an hour. Levers can do that. So just say instead of a 5-ton train, a 5 mass, a 5-pound object, or a 5-ounce object versus a 10-ounce object. And you just hit them on the right place in the lever, and the lever does the converting. Unlike a Newton's cradle, a lever can directly convert one momentum, one mv, into a different mv, or mv, or vm. Yeah. That's exactly what levers have been doing for thousands of years.
2x distance to leave at twice the speed. Hence the same energy input will result in an object leaving with twice the kinetic energy. Let us see how this claim holds up in an actual experiment.
So an actual experiment, again, that will look nothing like what I've described. It will be nothing like it. It is nothing like it. It is completely different experiment. Yeah. So let's see if we do a completely different experiment, whether we can prove that experiment doesn't work. That's how bad this is. I mean, this is grotesque deception. The fact that morons actually think these two experiments have something to do with each other is just fucking amazing.
The experiment here involves a bearing with two opposite rods and weights
and a weight tied to them with a pulling weight. A pulling weight wrapped around it. He's going to spin these objects. He isn't going to balance them.
Placed at various distances. In setup number 1 we have 2x masses at 1x distance at both ends, and in setup number...
Right, so again, exactly not the experiment I described. So I described a non-weighted balance, first off, okay? And all you do is introduce energy on one side, and the other side will start the oscillation. The one side will push the energy into gravity. Gravity will give back the energy. It'll go into the other side, and it will oscillate 100 times with a good bearing. And it'll just keep doing the same thing. Twice the velocity on one side, half the velocity on the other side. Twice the mass, half the velocity. It'll prove momentum works. It'll prove conservation of momentum. This experiment is not that experiment. This experiment spins the weights tied to the bar, which means the total weight, when it spins upwards, the total weight of the two mass and the one mass are both pushing down on the bearing. So we're right back to the friction argument. Friction isn't even. You know, damn. These people are stupid.
Number 2 we have a 2x mass at 1x distance at one end and a 1x mass at 2x distance at the other end. In both setups, the weights balance each other out exactly as how draft science desired.
What I described.
A string attached to a weight is wrapped around the bearing to provide a torque, and we observe...
Yeah, he could do this experiment where actually he had the two, if he could make two. You know, this is the same one redone with different configurations. He just superimposed the two experiments on top of each other. But I mean, technically, if he had two of these little bearing devices, he could actually tie them together with a string and do exactly what I'm saying. He could punch one of the levers on one side, and he could move the lever on the other side. This would be a direct conversion of the energy. But he didn't even do that. He did this lie.
And time the motion of the rods.
So again, do I need to state this is not the experiment I was talking about? This isn't what I described. I didn't describe going to the carnival and the test was you spin a wheel. Okay, and I make a heavy wheel and I make a light wheel, and I say, oh yeah, they both spin with the same speed. Heavy wheels and light wheels, same energy to spin them the same speed. That wasn't my argument at all. I didn't make that argument. It's not Galileo's argument. It's not Newton's argument. It's not Descartes' argument. Not my argument. So this is just such a cheat.
that if you pushed on a lever, and I put a one mass here, and then I switched it, and I put a half mass here, and you couldn't see which one was there. There was a wall, you couldn't see what was on the other side of the lever. There's no way from you pushing on it that you could tell the difference.
Can you believe he's showing me, describing a completely different experiment, and somehow he's trying to connect what he's doing to what I stated, and that somehow he's demonstrated that isn't true, when he hasn't demonstrated any such thing. He hasn't taken a balance and then put energy into one side of the balance. Nothing like it. He's putting energy into the bearing.
I put a 2 on a small gear, or a 1 on the outside gear. You couldn't tell the difference.
Just concede, okay? If there's a 1 mass and a 2 mass, on a lever, the total mass would be 3. If I had a 2 mass and a 2 mass, the total mass of the lever would be 4. The wheel doesn't weigh the same. So yeah, if I try to spin it through 360 degrees, okay, one wheel weighs more than the other wheel, so they're not going to spin at the same rate with the same energy put in. Obviously, the heavier the wheel, if I have a heavy flywheel, it takes a lot of energy to get one rotation. If I have a light flywheel, it's almost no energy to get one rotation. So it clearly isn't the experiment.
For $1 billion, you couldn't tell the difference.
So he's just going to keep doing the same thing over and over, right? Keep doing an experiment I didn't describe. It's clearly not the experiment I described.
It's worth noting that the bearing and the rods have comparable mass to the weights, and they are not insignificant to the total moment of inertia in the various...
So there's no moment of inertia, again, just made up concept. There's no inertia. There's no resistance to motion. All there is friction. So if you eliminate friction, you're out in space, and you put a spring between the Empire State Building and a P, and then you release the spring. Guess what? Okay, you'll end up shooting the spring, the P, with half the energy, and the other half will actually go into the Empire State Building, and it will actually move. A billion times slower, but it will move. Fact.
Test cases. Nonetheless, the times across the different test cases are significantly different compared to the time variations within each test case. Thus, the time differences between the test cases are identifiable. Because the lever does not move the same way when you replace a 2x mass at 1x distance by a...
So again, the lever now weighs different when you go through 360 degrees of rotation. You're just saying, I'm making a heavy wheel and I'm making a light wheel. Now that's a completely different argument than the fact that levers convert momentums through 90 degrees of motion. Nobody uses levers in 300 degree motions.
1x mass at 2x distance, Gary's lever argument fails.
So that's
a given
lie.
amount of force applied.
So there didn't fail, he didn't prove anything, he didn't touch my argument with it. He didn't even come close. I mean, it would be at least interesting if somebody knew I had a friend. Apparently nobody has a friend, okay, who is participating in this argument. And they could actually test this by actually creating the little box where you could change the masses without the other person knowing, and actually seeing if they could tell the difference. Because they won't be able to.
Over a fixed amount of time will not result in the same motion in both cases, so Gary's claims in question are wrong.
Alright, so I showed the pendulum, the lever, oscillating perfectly, okay, through maybe 100 oscillations, before it runs out of energy from the tiny bit of friction on the fulcrum. So it clearly does happen. He didn't prove anything wrong. He didn't prove that it doesn't work. The one mass moves at twice the velocity of the two mass, based on the location on the lever. It oscillates perfectly. The energy moves from one side to the other side, to the other side, to the other side, back and forth through the oscillator. He hasn't touched those as absolute fucking facts at all. All he's done is lie and distort to claim this bullshit experiment has anything to do with what I proposed. It's such a gross, disgusting fucking lie.
In fact, these results are bad news for Gary in more than one way. Not only do they
Look,
dispute his
in a
lever...
way, it's very good news because it just shows what the desperation causes. Professor Lewin stuck clay on his fucking experiment because he's going to force it to come out the way he wants. This guy is clearly saying, I don't care what you suggested as an experiment. I'm going to distort it and pervert it to force an outcome that looks different than what you're suggesting. I'm going to cheat the facts and the truth as much as I can to support my stupid fucking fable. These are religious fanatics. These are fanatics who are sitting there making fake fossils, you know, building their fake Noah's Ark, doing whatever they can to support their irrational and retarded fucking theory. This is just Shroud of Turin lies and deception. These people are lying fakes and phonies, just being fanatic jihadists, okay, in their effort to support their fucking idiotic fables. They have no integrity, nothing. They can't speak an honest sentence.
Argument, but they demonstrate that energy cannot be the same as momentum. This is because in the experiment, when we...
So there's no evidence that energy isn't momentum. There's no evidence that momentum doesn't have to be conserved. As Professor Lewin said, you cannot finagle. Nature cannot finagle momentum. So nowhere in your experiment did you prove momentum isn't conserved. Liar.
replace the two weights by weights that are half the mass at twice the distance, we obtain a different rotation speed, despite having the same constant
Right, and never did I, not in any of my videos did I talk about rotating wheels. Nowhere in any of the videos was rotating a wheel part of the experiment.
force. Regardless of whether you think the energy input is given by mgh,
Gravity is mgt. Yeah, it's a huge difference, a gigantic difference. Mgt makes gravity perfectly consistent with momentum. It makes it perfectly understandable that, oh, it's about how much time. It's twice the time, twice the weight, twice the velocity. Obviously, twice the energy. Okay, not mgh.
or mgt, we see that for the same amount of energy, having
There's
the
no
mass does
same
not...
amount of energy with both of those things. MGT doesn't predict the same, doesn't get the same answers as MGH. They get completely different answers. You can't sit there, regardless of which one we use, it's the same energy. Well, it's not the same energy by your own fucking idiotic definition, you stupid fuck. Oh, amazingly dumb.
double the speed. If Gary's notion that energy equals m times v were correct, then having the mass would result in twice the speed for the same energy input, which is not what we see. Thus,
Well, you will see it, frankly, even with a wheel, depending on where you proportion the mass. So just like the spinning skater, where you put the mass makes all the difference. If the mass is on the outside, then you will rotate slower. If the mass is on the inside, you will rotate faster. Duh. Same exact energy.
Gary's understanding of energy and Newtonian mechanics itself is just flat out wrong.
Okay, so he didn't go anywhere near any of it. He didn't touch Newton's arguments, didn't touch mine, didn't touch Goddard's, didn't touch anybody's arguments here. He's just a lying fraud, okay, doing a fake experiment, proselytizing some notion that, look, I can fool you idiots. You idiots are stupid enough to think spinning a wheel is the same as balancing a lever. Same experiment. No, it's not the same experiment.
His understanding leads to a result that is verifiably wrong.
So, bullshit.
And lastly,
lie.
it's worth pointing out, in none of the linked videos where he makes his lever argument does he ever actually invoke Newtonian mechanics or the laws of rotational motion.
Because I'm not rotating anything. The whole idea is I'm just lifting things. I'm using the lever to lift things. I'm not using the lever to rotate anything. For fuck's sake. God damn. I'm not moving something across, okay, the field. I'm moving things up into gravity against a constant force. That's the whole point. The constant force, gravity, is what's giving the things the same weight. Gravity is creating a disproportion in the way it applies the force to the two objects. The more mass you have, the more gravity you collect. and the lever does the conversion.
He doesn't even draw any actual force body diagram. He simply bases his assertion that the lever...
There's nothing missing in the diagram, so I'm just saying, what else does the diagram need? The diagram doesn't need anything else. I'm pleading with you to draw the same diagram and explain it to us. Explain how the one mass somehow changes how the lever moves. That somehow the one distance from the two, I have the one mass out on the lever. Show how at the 2 position the lever is moving differently when the one mass is on the lever. That if I would have had the 2 mass there, somehow the lever would have moved differently. Because it won't move differently.
will respond the same whether it has a 2x mass at 1x distance versus a 1x mass at 2x distance, simply because the lever balances out when you have a 2x mass at 1x distance on one end and a 1x mass at 2x.
Clearly the energy moves from one side to the other, all of the energy. And all the energy is transferred again, and then all the energy is transferred back, and then all the energy is transferred to the other side. Clearly, the skater does not generate different amounts of energy by moving their arms in and out. They have the same energy.
Distance at another end. This is such laughably insufficient reasoning. It's hard to imagine how any fool could take themselves seriously making such a
Okay, so just understand that this is their, oh, yeah, we just want to have a rational conversation. So, obviously. And again, he's sitting and calling me the fool when he's making a video to you, an audience, and he's insulting your intelligence by saying, look at this completely different experiment I did. Look how it proves that experiment wrong. I mean, it's disgustingly putrid.
Rapid argument. The 2x mass at 1x distance and the 1x mass at 2x distance result in the same torque on the lever, but that says nothing about the relationship between a given applied torque and the rotational velocity of the...
So again, more rotational velocity. There's nothing about rotation. It's about just lifting something into gravity and letting things fall in gravity. Nothing to do. The rotation is irrelevant to any part of my description of the experiment, just as it was irrelevant in Brozo's experiment where he flipped the cue balls. He flipped them with the same energy. He's just pushing them up against gravity. So just keep lying that this is about rotation. It's not about rotation.
Lever, which is related through the moment of inertia, and is different for the 2x mass at 1x distance and the 1x mass at 2.
So again, it just keeps lying, okay, that obviously a wheel that weighs 3 pounds will move at a different speed than a wheel that weighs a total of 4 pounds. Those are 2 different weighted wheels. Okay, we're not talking about a wheel. Every lever would have that flaw in it. If you had to move the whole lever, right? If you're lifting a car with a 10-foot lever, all right, and you speculate about rotating the lever with the car on the lever, obviously it's not going to work.
X distance. If Gary had just consulted any basic mechanics textbook he would know this, but alas he does not know any mechanics. He simply reasons from his gut and declares falsehood as truth, and this...
So let's just understand who was false here. Overtly false. Did he do my experiment? Did he test it the way I described it? Was his experiment anything like what I explained? I explained a simple lever with a simple fulcrum. Okay, no third arms, no other bullshit attached, just that simple experiment. Did he do that simple experiment? No.
This is a perfect example showcasing this.
This is a perfect example
but don't take it from
of the
me.
fake
I encourage
science. Fake science by fake liars, by fucking advocates for absolute horseshit. Okay, that's all he is. He's a religious fanatic trying to prove his silly, idiotic, the existence of his walk-on-water Jesus. And he's doing it with smoke and mirrors. He's doing it with fake and fraud experiments that have absolutely nothing to do with proving Jesus can walk on any fucking goddamn water. This is just lying, okay?
Anyone interested to try any of the shown experiments themselves?
Yeah, I would go ahead, try the lever experiment yourself. Go ahead, go do this really tough experiment, okay? Get yourself a scale and a decent camera and then drop weights on the scale. And know what you're going to find? That if you drop any weight from 1 centimeter, it'll weigh twice as much as when it's just sitting on the scale. And then when you drop it from 4 times higher, it's only going to weigh twice as much when it hits the fucking scale. That's what you're going to find out. It weighs twice as much, it's going twice as fast, it's in the gravity twice as long, and yet you fucking morons think it's reasonable to believe it has 4 times the energy. No, it doesn't. You're the idiots, and you're showing you're worse than idiots because here you are lying that somehow your fucking experiment had anything to do with what I suggested. It wasn't connected or related at all. Nowhere did I say, wind a thread around a spool and then pull on it. Shit. Fucking goddamn. You fucking creature. You're a fucking creature.
Just make sure the moment of inertia of the weights is comparable to the moment of inertia of...
There's no moment of inertia. Again, nothing resists motion. You just have to get the energy into it. In the Newton's cradle, when you have the uneven masses, the problem is this one is going to decelerate. The quick thing is going to decelerate at a different rate than this 2 mass needs to accelerate. So the two don't match. So the energy can't get in from this object, can't go straight into the 2 mass object at the different velocity. It can't do it. All right? And the lever can. And that's why levers are famous. Is because they can do what the Newton's cradle can't. Oh, God. Oh, you just sit here and say, I just can't believe people who are reasonably scientifically literate would stoop to these low a level to sit there and put this piece of steaming propaganda lie on the fucking internet and say, look, I proved something that's completely different than what was argued.
Your lever. This can be verified simply by doing a test case with no weights, and then comparing it to the test case with the weights. I recommend trying to obtain a 1.5x timing
do a
difference.
lever without any weight on it. It's going to, yes, it'll move at a different rate than if you have weights on it. Yes. Duh. Oh, amazing. And the weights are important, right? It's not about mass, it's about weight. You're comparing 2 weights. You're not comparing 2 masses.
Or greater, which would imply that the weights really do contribute a significant moment of inertia, and changing their distances would likewise change the moment of inertia noticeably. Thank you for watching.
Absolute crap. There's no moment of inertia. The skater couldn't put their arms out and then put their arms in and then put their arms out and put their arms in if there was a moment of inertia. If there was something consuming the energy, they couldn't do it. Moron. So just a complete lie video. Just a despicable lie. How dare you use my name when you don't show anything, you fucking coward. What right do you have? You can have a screen name, you can hide. And you'll sit there and play with somebody else's identity, you fucking piece of shit. Alright, thank you to Draft Science and Parabologic for providing an experiment that directly debunks your poorly thought out pseudo-scientific crap. So again, where was this experiment anything like what I described? He showed me doing it, drawing it 4 times in that video. Did I draw spinning a wheel? No, I didn't do that. Oh, I won't even read this. This is such vile crap. God, you people are so fucking evil. Look at Brozo. This is great. He thinks this has something to do with the argument I made. I mean, amazing. And his own fucking experiment proves this to be crap. I just can't, it's just amazing. The idea of moment of inertia in essence is making the lever and masses an aggregate object. Yes, he's aggregating the object by going circular. Ugh. Well, anyway. 12 replies. Don't know if it's worth reading all this crap. So we'll go back to it some other time, see if there's any preciously good arguments in here. Let's see. Let me know when you're ready to answer. Let's see. And argue ad infinitum. Suddenly you forget I speak of instantaneous transfer. Yes, we're talking about impulse energy. We're talking about the total energy put into a system. Well, anyway. And start schooling me about elastic and inelastic. And there's no elastic or inelastic in this experiment at all. Complete tangents and arguments before very much are filled with straw. Yes, this is obviously, he's made a straw experiment. Completely fake, phony, straw bullshit experiment. Has nothing to do with the assertions I made. Okay. I'm thinking a proper experiment saves me from all this you do. Yeah, well, whatever. Obviously, just doing what I suggested. Okay. Can't touch that. Dun, 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 dun. Can't touch that. Dun, 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 dun. Can't touch what I actually said, what I actually draw. Dun, 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 dun. Because you people are sucky, lame pieces of fucking lying crap. And you just keep proving it. Thank you for that, I guess. You're just demonstrating that I can't find an honest goddamn adversary here. Every one of you has to cheat, cheat, cheat. You're stinking, cheating weasels. Ugh. Alright. So, if I haven't mentioned it before, I do hate this planet. Covered in human scum. Really. You people really can't show any integrity at all. You have no character, no dignity, no self-respect at all. God damn. Yeah. Till the next time and such. Fuck. I hate you people.